economic, societal, and government upheaval, so you can stay ahead of the changes in our world and keep your family safe. Fortunately for us, we can recognize that we're at the precipice, a point in history where we can all see the cycle changing. Where we go from here is up to us. So let's start the conversation, and welcome to the show.
And I do welcome you wherever you are on this beautiful blue planet. I'm half a world away in Asia. So there is a little lag on the audio. That's 12 hours of communication time. Yeah, our world has definitely moved into a different era in as quickly as a week. And I was looking on our feed over at Civilization Cycle on X, and somebody was asking Trump, are you going to lower interest rates and will the Fed listen to you? And he jokingly laughs and says, yeah, ha, ha, ha. So I have actually 3 Fed stories before I'd even seen that. So the fire cost right now with the new fires that have just blown up into 10,000 acres near Los Angeles and Santa Clarita, it's well over $600 billion right now in terms of damages. And this is going to go well over $1 trillion by the time it finishes through LA here. And currently they have $24 billion for insurance premium coverage on that. So they're going to be shortfall around 950 trillion. That's being conservative, or 950 billion, excuse me. So who's going to cover that? The same with the Federal Reserve. When you look at the FDIC insurance program, only currently has enough to insure 1.3% of all deposits in American banks. India has something very similar going on with its insurance program, but they have 1.5% coverage in India of all the bank deposits. If they were to fail, only 1.5% would be bailed out. And then I was trying to use the RTP function, which is a payment system. I couldn't use Zelle. I needed to pay somebody in Hong Kong, and they had a branch in the United States of HSBC. So HSBC, you cannot use Zelle, you cannot use Venmo, you cannot use pay to person. They use what's called RTP. So I called my bank and I was like, hey, I need to activate the RTP function. And they're like, we don't know what that is. And I said, well, it's the FedNow account wallet. What's so strange talking about the Treasury, the FedNow account wallet's active around the rest of the world, but it's not active in the United States yet, which makes me scratch my head. Okay, that's open and active in Hong Kong to receive deposits, but why can't we use it in the United States ourselves? So there's a lot of things going on, and this great white rain has returned with the massive blizzards across Texas and Louisiana. There's more snow in Louisiana right now than New York and Alaska. If you can believe that, over the last 10 days, there's been more snow in Louisiana and near Baton Rouge and near other places. Mardi Gras and these sort of Bourbon Street areas have more snow than Alaska got in the last 10 days, and more than New York. So, you're looking at Florida Panhandle blizzards. Everywhere you look, the apple cart's being upset. And this great white rain that has returned after 130 years to the Southeast U.S., we're starting to see the changes, and the excuses they gave us for global warming just aren't going to fit this. Blizzards in Florida, blizzards in, places in southern Louisiana there, New Orleans with a blizzard warning. That doesn't make sense to what we were told. And Ransom, I see you zooming in on a map there. So what do you got for us? That's my slow to do introduction. Thank you everybody joining us tonight, and thank you for everybody supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/civilization cycle. Going to be an exciting show. Ransom's got a ton of material lined up for you. So Ransom, take it away. And aloha from Taiwan. It's going to be 70 degrees today for those of you freezing your buttocks off in the U.S.
Well, that's pretty warm. It's sitting at a nice 22 for me right here, and we're way down by the border. So we're getting a little taste of what Florida and even Mexico is getting right now. So let me put that map back up, and you can see down there in the Gulf of America along the Mexican coast, there's a severe cold warning. Cold front. And actually, all over the United States right now, there are warnings, as you can see on that map. Icing, snow, freezing deep into Florida. And as you were bringing up, everybody's freaking out like global warming, but check this out. I found this on Twitter here. It says February 1895, very similar system rolled along the Gulf Coast. It was just a little further west, but it dumped more snow than this one. So you got 28 inches in Beaumont, Texas, Lake Charles, Louisiana, 22 inches. Houston, Texas had 20 inches. So you could just see that's a lot of snow. And it looks like we're hitting this, short cycle, which might be part of a large cycle to keep coming. And I don't know if you saw this, but there is wind approaching the UK close to a Category 4 hurricane. So they have warnings all out in the UK as well. Let me get back on that map. But literally everywhere. Life-threatening cold to expand southward across the nation, impacting 235 million. That's what, 2/3 or more of the U.S. population underneath life-threatening cold weather. And here's the chill map for you guys. And if you see those little pockets down in Florida, they're going to get cold, and that's where the warnings are at there in Florida too. All around Tampa, Orlando, all of that stuff is getting cold weather advisory for freezing. And then, of course, if you have craft, there's all kinds of winds. And then you go over to the West Coast, a bunch more fire weather for everybody. But this is what I thought was interesting. Look at this all the way down right next to Guatemala, a severe cold front. That's what they're calling it. It's probably going to get like 40 degrees for them, but that's a big deal. And then here's one all the way from Texas to the Yucatan, and it says cold front severe. And even where I'm at, which is usually warm, I mean, we do get cold. They have a cold weather advisory here. It's dropping down to the tens and maybe single digits, and negative degrees in the mountain areas. We've had that for the last week. So everybody's getting their chill on in this fantastic global warming going on right now.
How do you say muy frias?
Muy frío, yeah. Let me see. I wanted you.
Oh, frío.
I wanted you
Nothing's
to ask
frío
you about
in America. The inflation's gone big, so.
Right. Let me find this. It's about the...
yeah, if anybody is out there hunting iguanas or pythons, this is the perfect time because they're just going to be laying there. So, there's tons of recipe. Now, don't laugh. Iguana is quite good meat, actually. So the pythons as well, too, if there's a certain way to prepare certain types of snake meat. So if you're down in Florida or in some of these areas where you get a lot of reptiles and sort of things, it's kind of going to be a nice meat foraging type of environment here of a lot of creatures that are very difficult to run. Yeah, I mean, you got to use 22s to hunt the iguanas. They're tied up in the trees. They're fast. They're down near the water. They take off. But mark my words, there's a couple of channels I've watched through the years here. Deer Meat for Dinner is one of them. Guy down in Florida. Wanted to go down hunting with him. But they were down getting a bunch of iguana, real big ones, like super, 3 foot long ones, and doing all kind of recipes and things with it. But there's definitely meat source. So, if you're thinking that there could be shortages or something, and you do come down into that situation where you can't get to a store, but you got some like snakes that are just frozen out there that have stopped moving because they're reptiles, or you get the iguanas, free meat for you. And I would encourage you to try it in our day and age right now to see what you could possibly wild forage, because a lot of people won't touch that. But the iguana, seriously, seriously good meat. So please give it a try. If you find any iguanas falling out of the trees, just, get them on the Barbie and then you're good to go.
Not to mention those big anacondas and pythons that are invasive species. So as a matter of fact, You're not going to get in trouble for eating those. And think about that. One of those snakes would fill up a freezer full of meat. So, if you're not on the, picky eating end of things, that's a lot of free meat. If you can wrangle that thing, be careful. They are strong. But in this cold weather, not so much. They're just kind of like a big roast waiting for you to grab it. But I wanted to ask you, you brought up that...
Ransom, if I could interject there, they do pay you by the foot for the snakes, those invasive Burmese pythons.
Right.
You can get a permit from the state of Florida. Anybody can. Me, Ransom, can get it. And even if you're just driving down the road just one random day and you have a permit and you get it, so you get a 12-foot long python, they pay you by the foot. Whatever you are, even if you're just a single person who gets just one snake a year, they will still pay you by the foot to try to remove those, because the amount of habitat destruction and just absolute devastation in the ecosystem from these pests. This is a great time to try to, nature's giving us maybe a foothold or like a foot through the door there to try to remove some of these pests that are otherwise unremovable. But maybe this cold's going to be a blessing. Maybe it will, because those Burmese pythons absolutely need to be removed. One female can drop, 30 eggs in a clutch. And they all hatch out and whoosh, there they all go. Got 30 more big, huge pythons that need to be eating. And there's millions of them down there. They're uncontrollable. So paid by the foot. If you're looking for a new job, move to Florida and wrangle up some pythons.
That's a pretty good deal to get paid and get free meat. Everything's about to change. And I just wanted to say one thing about these freezes and fires. I know they're devastating to humans, but as far as nature goes, this is weeding out the weak animals, which leaves only the strong animals to survive. And there will be an explosion on the next cycle of better, healthier animals, because all of the sickly animals. And think about this. You're probably going to get to enjoy a spring without so many bugs this year. All through the South, I'm not a fan of the bugs, but this always reduces their numbers a lot. So if you're out there cleaning up your properties, getting rid of brush and piles of wood right after this freeze, you'll get rid of most of the eggs from everything to parasites to the things that attack your gardens. So, those, what do they call them? Squash bugs. They always hide in debris, and that's where they come out. So if you clean up that debris this year after a great freeze or a great fire, you're not going to have bugs. And that's actually a good thing for preparing food this coming spring. But I have a feeling that the cold may last a little bit into the spring this year. You never know. We might get a heat wave in response. But things are shaking up from weather to everything that in civilization. We're truly upon a civilization cycle. And you were mentioning a minute ago, which is something that I brought up before Trump got elected, that the way our system is now with the Federal Reserve, Trump really can't do nothing about that. And they kind of gloat at the Federal Reserve about doing their own thing despite whatever the U.S. government wants to do. However, Trump may be biting with some teeth this time. A lot of people laughed at that comment about him asking the Treasury to do something, which is in effect the Federal Reserve. But he also signed an executive order banning central bank digital currencies in the U.S. And not only that, I don't know if you saw him talking about Spain the other day, but he was pretty much kind of threatening BRICS nations that they would do better to stay with the U.S. Than, join any kind of BRICS alliance, because he's going to tariff any country that is a BRICS nation, which is half the world right now, approximately, as far as business and trade. And all across that you look, I'm feeling like Nostradamus again. So he has signed an executive order to go after the cartels as terrorist organizations. And I've been watching different politicians from both ends of the aisle using the same term, which is usually predictive programming, that they are going to wipe the cartels off the face of the earth. And people are asking, well, what does Mexico have to say about that? And somebody was joking. I saw one of the guys joking about what are they going to do about it? They can't even provide clean drinking water to their population in the second decade of the 21st century. So they're not really going to do much. And when you hear the politicians, when they respond to like, what if Mexico doesn't like that? They're all pretty much saying the same thing, that the U.S. doesn't care. We're going after them. And that is a prediction I made, that we would have combat operations along the southern border over here in the Western Hemisphere. And not only that, it brings up new problems. It may be good in the long term, as far as how many people are dying in the U.S. They get poisoned by things that may or may not come across the border. But this is actually going to hurt China as well. As you know, a lot of the products are coming from there that are being transported across the border here. So I even heard one guy there, when he was signing executive orders, asked if it was likely we would be sending special forces into Mexico. And Trump responded, you never know. It's possible. Because, you know, he's one of those guys that in the past has said, why would I tell you what we're going to do? I'm not like the other people that tells everybody on the news before we do it, so they know when to hide in the tunnels and when to go hide. He's not going to do that. So all of those facilities, and I'm going to throw a woo-woo out there. What if the whole time...
I love the woo.
What if the whole time Biden and Trump are on the total same page? Biden set up certain circumstances for Trump to fix. And one of those is, you remember a while back, I showed an article on one of our shows about how Biden was investing into these AI data centers to collect massive amounts of information. And now Trump is now saying we are going to be the capital of AI and cryptocurrency of the world. And guess what? He's going to be doing the same thing with the same program, which is setting up these giant data centers on federal land using the water off the federal land. And, you know, a lot of people were talking about how they couldn't get water on those fires out in California. It's because it's all been diverted, used for other things. That not really the data centers. I'm not saying that, but the fact that all of the reservoirs were full and they didn't have the ability to use them. They weren't ready. It seems like, I'm not going to say a setup, but at least a massive amount of incompetence is now ready to be fixed. So we're going to have, like Trump said, a small golden age of transformation. How that'll work out in a decade, I don't know, because you have to remember, similar actions happened when we went into the Middle East, and necessarily and inevitably, we're going to have blowback and collateral damage, which is what causes that blowback. And this is going to throw a lot of chaos in the food industry. So everybody's about to redo their contracts. It's all up for grabs right now. How it lays out, I don't know. You know, you have to say that he is doing a lot of promises that he said he was going to do. He went right into signing executive orders for that. So you kind of have to wait a little while, so to speak, for the empire to strike back, right? So I don't think that they can fix it all by themselves, because there's too many working parts, and a lot of that is weather related. And, you know, there's a lot of egg on the faces of the global warming hoaxers right now. And even the social media people are pulling back on the censorship of the alternative ideas and data because they have no choice. You know, when you're seeing Florida and New Orleans having blizzards, it's kind of hard to convince people that the planet is burning up. The only people hot right now are in Australia.
Yeah, and that Illuminati term, the golden age, there's no such thing as a small golden age. It's an age, the age of ages. Come through, it could be the age of Aquarius, the age of Sagittarius, the age of Taurus, the age of Leo, when the Sphinx was created 10,000 years ago. So the golden age, ages are quite long. They're 2,000 years. So whether it be the Reich for 1,000 years or the golden age for whatever they want to term it this time for 2,000 years, it is what it is. Nothing small comes this way. But if I could, swing back to what you were talking about, that article, no central bank digital currencies here for the United States. Okay, what's the other option then? They're going to have to use an existing protocol. And they're probably going to have to derivatize. As we've seen, I was watching Catherine Austin Fitts the other day, and they were reading the prospectus from BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF. And it was in the wording, they were laughing, and they couldn't stop laughing as they were trying to, well, it's going to try to mimic the price of Bitcoin. There's no real underlying Bitcoin behind it. They're going to try to realize the price. They're trying to stabilize. They're trying to mimic. They're trying to. So when you look at it, it's really a derivative contract. So they can spin money out of nothing based on that. But at the same time, if they're going to use RippleNet or XRP, Stellar Lumens, that's already a pre-existing protocol that was slated, at least in a lot of documents I had read from the Banks for International Settlements, the SOLA project, SOLA. It dovetailed all of the individual projects that were out in there and kind of wrapped them into one. So if you're looking at mBridge, which was Saudi Arabia, China, I think it was United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and there was another country in there. So they were running as an autonomous, like one unit. Okay, that would have been, those 6 or 7 would have been encapsulated, and that was one of those that would have been captured into SOLA, SOLA, the whole blockchain protocol for the Bank for International Settlements, moving out on the different layers that they were going to use. And they never said which distributed ledger they were going to use, but there's really only one. There's only one, Ripple. That's it. It's always ever been. And when you say things have been fictitiously put the way they were to keep them, let's say, on the back burner, like this entire CFTC thing, never giving us enough regulation in the crypto world to understand if something was illegal, was it a unsecured offering, what was it? Was it commodity? Like that, all that XRP traction was put on the back burner until it's needed right now. And suddenly Gensler's gone and they bring in a bunch of new people who are super pro crypto, because that was the whole thing. And I'll tell you my personal story, which, really made me think about a lot of this stuff earlier in the last day or so. So a friend of mine helped me out, and I wanted to give him back money instead of the things they gave me in terms of physical things. I thought, all right, I'll give you back the money. So I wanted to just use my wire or transfer service from my bank and then just simply transfer money over. Impossible. HSBC does not use Zelle or Venmo, which are two popular ones in America. Those are American native bank ones. So you can use those all within the US. Now, Hong Kong banks, not a chance. They're not intertwined in that. So first, that was an unknown for me. I thought every bank on the world used Zelle. I thought they were all interoperated until I understood that when you use Zelle, Bank of America steps in the middle and controls your money until it's delivered to, and JP Morgan as well, until it's delivered to the next. So if something were to happen in that middle transaction, Bank of America owns your funds. Well, even though it's with Zelle, it left their bank account, Bank of America captured it, it's being transferred through the Zelle system, and until it hits the deposit in the next thing, you gave your money to Bank of America. Okay. But then they had this pay-to-peer thing, because I have a business, so I was going to try to pay for my business, use my business account, send the money, think it would be easier. And lo and behold, the only thing that currently HSBC, which is a Hong Kong bank, can use in America is RTP. And that's just a rapid transfer protocol. And I was like, all right, I haven't really heard of this RTP before. So I had to activate it in my bank because it wasn't activated. And I called up a bank and they're like, we really don't know what this is. And I'm like, well, wait a second. You're on the clearinghouse list for RTP on the website of those that are running this program. How is it not, you don't even know what it is when you're a signatory and a beneficiary and a clearinghouse for this RTP program, how is it that you don't understand what the program is? Like I want to just send some money to somebody that I owed for a loan, for example, you know? Like, oh, RTP, we don't know. Okay, let me just put you on hold and I'll get back here. So what I'd known on my personal research before anything about RTP was the FedNow wallet that everybody, if you're an American and you have a Social Security card, you already have a FedNow wallet issued to you, whether you know it or not. Every Social Security number has now a directly tied FedNow wallet to it. Now, the American dollar you're being paid right now in your paycheck, like you get $1 American dollar in, that's a Treasury issued US dollar. Federal Reserve, like that's in that ecosystem. But central bank digital currency, FedNow account is not. It's a different type of a dollar. So you get paid in apples. And like the thing I needed to do was I had to convert my apples into oranges into the new FedNow dollar to then send it to a RTP account over at HSBC. That was a brain spinner for me there, that the US dollar you think's a dollar had to be converted to another different kind of a dollar. It's not active in America yet, but it's active outside the United States. So HSBC, excuse me, and those that are transferring money through London banks are using our native RTP protocols already with some digital dollar issuance to trade and send money instead of using wire transfer right now. But we in America are, we're not, excuse me, not open yet. We have the accounts each issued to us, but I don't know if they're, and this is what, when I showed me that article that Trump was saying there's going to be no CBDC, I'm like, well, wait, we all have FedNow accounts. So how is this magic going to work unless it's an existing protocol that already exists? And the Ripple US dollar would be the one that makes sense the most. So trying to actually activate my RTP account and my old FedNow account, I tried to activate it today. Earlier today, it was like 3:30 a.m. or 3:30 p.m. your time. Trying to activate this FedNow account wallet in my own bank so I could transfer money. Zero success after multiple hours on the phone. And I'm telling you, zero people knew what the hell I was talking about. I just know a little about crypto because, you know, I like to delve into it and I like to see how we're going to get thrown in the future, how we're going to pay for things. Because if you can understand how payments are going to work in the future, you can see the future a lot more clearly. Like imagine if you know credit cards, you know, because I grew up in that time when we didn't have, you had to be very special to even get credit cards, you know. There was no debit cards. And I grew up during that era on the transition, but imagine if you'd seen so clearly with a crystal ball, like absolute 100% clarity, that you would have seen the credit card market evolving and you could understand it enough to see where Visa would be today back in the 1970s. Like you would be so far ahead of the game, you would never need to work again. That's the same thing with all this cryptocurrency. Like it is the future. As much as Visa is today in 2025, as they saw it in 1975, the same, it will be utilized globally. The same level, but probably 10 times higher. So to understand how money is going to move and where your constriction point might be and how you can live in a world without being on a social credit score. You know, these are the things I look into. But I'm telling you that RTP wallet and FedActive, you know, my wallet's active. All of our wallets are active, but there's no way to transfer the current US dollar from the Treasury / Fed into this new whatever protocol. I think because once it got transferred, we could find somewhere where it transferred, which type of money or which protocol it flipped into, and then you would know 100% for sure which thing to buy on the crypto market that would be the one the United States government's going to move all of our pre-existing money with into the trillions of dollars. So, and again, this is what I was trying to get at this morning. Activate it for me. Activate it. I want to see what it turns into. I want to see everything. And there's no hope. They will not let you do it currently. So that's my long story along with the Fed insurance there. And I was doing this one with the fires the other day. So before the current round of fires, it was $480 billion in California that they had insurance losses, but they only had $24 billion in coverage funds for that. So there was a giant shortfall, and they're going to be asking for some sort of federal bailout for that, because if they don't, the insurance industry, as we understand it, will go completely bankrupt. There's not enough money around in all the insurance companies currently just to cover the now almost $700 billion with the new LA fires that just covered 10,000 acres yesterday. We're approaching almost $1 trillion that they need to pay out. There's not that much money within the insurance companies because the banks are holding on to all this bad debt and bad bond issuance. And I was just reading a small report. If they needed to cover a fraction of that, they would have to sell at a loss. Currently in our banking system, that would be $360 billion loss, which would wipe out our entire banking system in America if they were to take such losses. So Silicon Valley Bank, remember that one that cascaded, and that's the reason for the capital controls in America. I encourage you, another thing, to try to send money to another account, to another person, or even your own account in a different bank. You're going to be limited to $250 per transaction. Capital controls are in the United States now, whether you know it or not. That Silicon Valley, Silvergate collapse that nearly took down our entire banking system was just, less than 20 billion. If the insurance companies need to sell something to pay out the claims, they're going to get a $360 billion loss. That'll wipe out everything that you know in America. The banks will be gone. The insurance companies will be gone. Our stock market will be in shatters. The home industry, the home loans, they'll be no longer existent. Just everything would evaporate in terms of everything we've ever known in terms of money, banking, finance, insurance, and stability of our world based on your savings account or your retirement fund would be down to zero. And if that's the kind of reset that they're looking for, then they have it in the California fires, because that could be the catalyst to really take down the entire system. Now, if that were to happen, there has to be a replacement. And guess what, Ransom? There's a replacement already ready. So please, everybody, look up the RTP program. And I would encourage you to call your banks and really understand what this is. And if you do learn what it switches into, you are going to be a billionaire. You just have to buy a few of those coins now, because the entire financial system on at least 36 trillion will be predicated on using that protocol. If you do, please send me and Ransom the message so we can retire, and we'll still bring you the message, but we'll be sipping cocktails on a beach bringing you the program.
That's funny. I retired 20 years ago, but I didn't get the retirement fund to go along with it. I just started working for myself, doing stuff. When you say that, that's really scary if you look at this article right here. This says that more people are only paying the minimum payment as credit card balance rise. The revolving credit card balances hit $645 billion, representing 71% of total card balances. Now, if everybody were to go broke and stop paying their credit card bills, there's an additional $645 billion that wouldn't be in the circulation. So you can imagine that if different dominoes hit at the same time, people aren't going to be paying their bills because they're going to be buying food and they're going to be taking care of necessities. So they're going to keep paying that minimum amount as long as they can until they can't pay that. And $645 billion is a lot. That's more than what you just said, was the
unrealized losses in our banking system.
And not only that, that's even more money than the losses that they're claiming from the fire. This is just money that people owe from buying things that they don't need. And, when we were around Christmas, they were talking about another $10 billion of things that people were going to buy on credit. And that most of those things were unnecessary trinkets. They weren't buying, storable foods. They weren't paying off their house for the future. They weren't trying to pay their car notes off. They weren't doing any of that. They were just buying junk because everyone's in this delusion that things can continue on the same way forever without ever changing. And if the weather is an indicator, that kind of just shows you one example of how things never stay the same. Never. They always change. Everything's inevitably going to end. And that includes all of these little cryptocurrencies that they just pop out that have no value behind them. So you got to stick with the ones that are actually backing up real value in the real world. So, you know, they have one of these I call them joke cryptocurrencies because they just launch it. You know, there was the Hawk Girl coin. She got about $5 billion that collapsed, or 5 million. I don't know what the number is. Don't quote me. But she got a lot of money, and then that just collapsed. Where did that money go? Right? And
pocket.
Yeah. Even the president and Melania, I don't know how much associated they are with the little coins that they launched, but me personally, I would advise against the fad crypto coins. And if you look at that guy, there's this guy that has side-by-side videos, I'm sure you've seen it, of him back in 2013 buying some Bitcoin and looking at the little graph, and I think it was like, I don't know, $13 or $14 or something like that, a Bitcoin. And then they fast forward, he's showing the same video after it went past $100,000. So if you could think about that guy is one happy dude right now because he stuck with it. He stayed through the ups and downs. I'm sure he got excited several times when it was at 20, when it was at 30, when it was at 60, and he didn't sell, and then it dropped back down, and now it's way up. So maybe they're going to be using literally Bitcoin as the standard here in the United States, because despite these other countries saying they're going to pass laws to not use it, like I said before, they're privately still using it. So they have their own backup currencies, Bitcoin, gold, silver, and even a bunch of people just made a lot of money off of iron recently, even though that's probably going to drop in price. People are making money off of changes that they see coming before it happens constantly. And the trick is kind of get ahead of. Wrong button.
Yeah, I have a number for you. 13 million is the valuation that they want to bring each Bitcoin to. Now, that was Michael Saylor's speech, and then a few others that also tagged along with that. He's like, if you sell your Bitcoin for 100,000 today, you're leaving 13 million on the table, approximately. So take the number out to 13 million and do the math with it then. And then derivatize that through all the, BlackRock ETFs and everything else, where people think they're investing in a Bitcoin, but it's a proxy for Bitcoin on a fraction of a Bitcoin. Like when you buy into that ETF, it's not 100% covered on Bitcoin. It's not. You need to read the prospectus, the BlackRock prospectus. And I encourage you to watch Catherine Austin Fitz, the way that they broke down as they were reading through the prospectus. And that whole, we keep hearing global warming, but why are the advertising companies allowed to still try to sell us two of something? If it was something that was a real threat, all global shipping would have stopped by now. Because you know what they did with asbestos and with chlorofluorocarbons and things. Leaded paint, leaded gasoline, for example. It stopped. It truly stopped. But we have airplanes now where you can get a $69 flight. There's more airplanes flying around the skies than ever. And these criminal advertising agencies allowed to sell you two of something. Buy one, no, buy two, buy three. It's Christmas. You have to buy for your loved ones. But wait, global warming. Oh, we got to, so this mixed messaging, sometimes when you watch a YouTube video, they would have the preceding video that would show would be, oh, the Arctic's melting, you got to think. And then it would be a whole company doing something, and then followed directly by those two advertisements in a row, followed by something that's on sale. You can buy two now. And I wish I could have recorded a few more of those, where that first message was the world's ending, global warming. And then the very, very next advertisement was buy two cars. That needs to stop too. If we're into this world where something is going drastically wrong, but I'll agree with you on the food. Like If food stops from Mexico, say, so just 2 points here. California produces an enormous amount of food. Now you might think, well, those fires aren't out in the vineyards, or they're not out in the plantations, and they're not out on the farms. True. But those loading centers, those consolidation centers where all that goes to, those were all in the fires. And then, Ransom, you could probably tell me more about the food coming from Mexico. I'm curious. So like if we were going to get cut off for a minute from Mexico, we're looking at least 30-40% reduction in food supply chains right now. There's going to be a lot of stranded food in the fields that'll never make it to market because there's just no refrigerated storage warehouses to put it in. There's just no warehouse. There's no storage and onward forwarding facilities. Those have been burned. So where does the food go? Right now, they're at a sort of a real standstill in California on food also. So tell me about the food in Mexico. I mean, you know far more about that. Let me hear it. Can I bend your ear for a couple minutes?
Well, I think the biggest problem they have is organized crime, which directly relates to the prices that we're getting. Now, I kind of think this is a weird idea, but mostly all of the same things that Mexico grows, we also grow in New Mexico, Arizona, and California in the little different grow zones. So I realized that there was a big fire and all of that, but that wasn't really where they grow the food. And another thing, even if it was, guess what's going to grow better next year after they have fields full of ash? Well, it's going to be all the crops they grow in California. So if they continue on with deportation, and right now, I don't know if you know, the border's closed. There's no entry. So they're not letting anyone in, whether they're legal, not legal, whatever. It's closed right now while they reorganize things. I don't know how long that's going to last. In fact, we have the in-laws visiting here from Mexico, and if they would have came this week, they would have got rejected, and then they would have had to fly all the way back to Mexico City because they couldn't get in. And I imagine that's only temporary. But as I was saying before, keep in mind that we built massive amounts of buildings all along the border. And this is why I say it gets a little woo-woo. First, they were used to bring everyone in, get their biometrics, ship them into different cities, thereby possibly changing the popular vote in the future. Now that's reversed. Now they're going home, but they need a place to stage them before they get rid of them. So all those same facilities are going to be used to house people before they get ejected, which is going to open up a lot of jobs for Americans. Not just jobs, but housing. And you could see that, like right now, things might get rough in the short term, but this is kind of like ripping the Band-Aid off of a lot of the problems. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but it looks like it may be positive. There may be people that decide that it's harder to get help from the government if we're reducing the size and scope of government and the payouts that they give. So they're already ejecting a lot of people that are unnecessary. Matter of fact, I don't know if you saw that. Trump signed an executive order where people had to go to work physically and be there and not from home. Since COVID, they've been doing it from home. So it's been remote working, which has allowed a lot of government waste. People are getting paid for nothing, and seemingly that's going to end. But here's one thing that I thought was really strange, just off topic here. John McAfee.
Oh, I saw that same image.
Right? And what does it say? Supposedly it says, I'm back. I'm this, I don't even know how to pronounce that, an AI version of myself. You don't think I would miss this cycle, the civilization cycle, do you? But look right here. It says, do not fall for scam tokens. What a warning to put out right now, right? So I thought this was really bizarre, the ghost of McAfee coming back to kind of mess with the public. I don't know who put that together or how that came about. But I do think it's ironic that in the field of AI, I also predicted the future a little bit. I don't know if you saw the meeting with Trump and some of these software people and medical field people. I'm going to try to talking word salad for a minute. But anyway, I did warn that in the near future, they would allow AI to control certain aspects of the medical industry, everything from cataloging your DNA to reselling you products, and all of the. I've recently sent my DNA to different, DNA sites like Ancestry and etc. And each one of those has the bulk of their sales is based on an AI checking out your DNA to decide what kind of diet you need, what kind of medicine you need, how often you need to exercise. Now, that all sounds great as a product you might want to buy, but when you're looking into these things like Stargate, Project Stargate, which is ironic because I got banned a few years ago for editing an episode of the show Stargate in which an alien came to the planet, offered us free health care in the form of intravenous drugs that would allow us to age longer, get rid of cancer, get rid of these different diseases, and it was personalized to humans, right? There was a downside, and I can't say the downside because that's probably what got me in trouble. So I think it's so ironic that all of these AI companies are trying to get in bed with the medical industry to produce personalized medicine for you to supposedly prevent really bad things from happening to you. And it's almost like I don't want to talk bad about Trump, but it's almost like he's tone deaf about what happened last time. Now, I've gone through some articles and I'll show you, and they have the same headlines as 2020. The same headlines. So the same things are happening. Shops are closing, things like that. It's really bizarre. So we're in this weird gray area right now where we don't know how these programs are going to, I guess, spiral out and what the real meaning is for people. So we're going to be one way or another, positive or negative, in direct competition with any other country on the planet that's technologically advanced. We're going to be at the forefront of AI track, trace, and analyzing of every aspect of your life and how it interacts with the entire human domain. So this literally is a new age. I don't know if it's golden or it's more of a nano age.
It's an orange age. Yeah. Well, that AI could predict into the future some genetic defects, and you could become uninsurable, could you not? Because you got to think, okay, if they're going to do personalized medicine to try to allow you to live longer, what happens if a certain population is like literally uncurable, or the lifespan, they know within 10 years you have a marker and you're absolutely going to die within 5 years, 10 years, 2 years, or whatever it is, that they'd be like, we're not going to give you life insurance now. We're not going to give you this type of insurance now. All based on, and again, the thing I would ask you, you sent that off to multiple, DNA testing. Do they all give you the same exact results, or is it slightly different? Because if it's slightly different, then, this AI taking over and looking at your DNA markers could also have different effects and different outcomes based on, where your lineage is from, if it was the correct one, or if they gave you the correct type of body, or the correct type, because in Indian Vedic medicine, if you're looking at, there's a type A, type B, and type C body. Like me, I'm one of those tall, skinny guys. I'm type A. Others, a little bit more stocky, type B. And then, I forget what the C type is, but the foods that we would ingest or that would be better for us would be different. Different foods for different types of bodies. Some metabolism is working super, super, super fast. Others working a little bit slower. So the same food is not going to be the same for every individual either. So even taking back, 4,000 years of study of this sort of thing, even such a simplistic way of looking at it and breaking it 3 different types of bodies on the human race itself would require slightly different foods within the 3 of those for optimal performance. So I'm just wondering, and Ransom, before we go on the break here, just wanted to read off, thank you for supporting us on civilizationcycle.com. Buy me a coffee. Thanks for the show tonight. Awesome. I'm glad you're here chatting with us and sending some thoughts to us, like, thank you so much. You're rocking it harder than anyone. We are trying to continue to do, I'm a 12-hour time difference. It's a little bit, it's a whole different world. You're going to bed. I'm just waking up, or I'd still a little bit jet lagged even weeks after being here, after traveling up to Japan. I still get up at like 3 or 4 in the morning, like reset me totally. But then I get really tired around 9 p.m. here. And, Ben Davidson on that last one was saying micronova's coming. So you got to wonder about magnetic field shifts, because when I talked about that, interesting, my own personal experience on the very first video talking about these blizzards a few days ago, I, at the very end of the video, started to mention that magnetic field excursions were happening, that jet streams would change and behave differently. Got like almost 4,000 views in the first hour, and then after 6 hours, it only went to 8,000 views. So you can see YouTube, even now, though, so those supposed to not be censoring, you explained it to me, almost 4,000 views in the first hour, and then it just literally drops off after 5 hours of a trending subject. I use all the trending words that were running through Google. I keyword searched it. I tried to get it to hit, like I did on that one that got 180,000 views, blew through the censors. I think it was far more than 180,000 views. They just like couldn't push it down fast enough. So I was trying to replicate that same thing using AI on the pulling the words, pulling the graphic, pulling these trending words. And, see something like that's really disheartening, where it's running and then it just flatlines completely because of the subject of trying to explain away, why are food prices getting so expensive? What's really happening with, the magnetic field on our planet, that sort of thing. That is still very verboten subjects to talk about. Like, I'm really hoping it changes where we can actually have a discussion of this polar vortex dipping that you're seeing now. If it continues, it's going to run into the same Gulf moisture from now. It's just going to be a new pattern that forms where we're going to get blizzards along the, southern coasts here. Would it be maybe next year exactly the same? Perhaps not, but it'll be a trend of perhaps more snow, first ever blizzard warnings in Louisiana. Well, that blizzard of 1899 in Florida would also have been what we consider like a classic blizzard, but it was below zero. If it was sub-zero temperatures, 2 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, far colder than this one. It only got to 6 Fahrenheit. So these things are repeating in the past. Now, if they saw that same, setup and things happening in 1899, centennial minimum, very low solar activity that allowed those jet streams to dip super low and smash off with that same Gulf-laden moisture pattern pushing up. And there's these two storm systems collide. You get the Arctic front, Siberian cold air, Arctic air, and it slams into that Gulf moisture, really warm, coming off the Gulf of America. Ransom, you need to work on your accent, because you said, America, it's Gulf of America, and you're talking Louisiana and Georgia. You got to work on the accent with that. But that is going to be a new prevailing pattern as it moves through. So are we ready for it? Are we allowed to talk about it? Well, currently, apparently not, because magnetic fields and you paying a global tax don't mix. So maybe that'll get our broadcast here labeled with the little blue UN box below. I don't know. But please support us on Buy Me a Coffee so we can offset some of these losses here from revenue from anything that we get off YouTube. We help us out. Please support the channel, because we talk about this, and again, these videos don't get the reach. We have to bring it out and try to throw it through a whole bunch of other channels. But then all that software to do that costs us money to try to bring that reach out beyond what we can get off of YouTube and these verboten subjects, as we would say. Ransom, looks like we're coming to the break. So any last words? And please stay around for hour number 2 right here with Civilization Cycle. I did want to go more deeply into this world that we're moving. How much is our food going to cost us moving in the future? Like, where are these losses going to go? Are we going to get 10, 20, 30% rises in food prices? Because I've just been through 2 countries in Asia out here, and I want to explain my stories of personal buying of supermarkets, traditional markets, and then also restaurants compared to American prices. The rice shortage is amplifying across Bangladesh and Japan, and we're starting to see it, the rice production really low across so many countries in Asia. We're going to have rice shortages this year for sure across the world. If you're a rice eater, and I would absolutely suggest that you would buy more and store it aside. Rice is going to be less available. It won't be unavailable completely. It'll be less available, and it's going to get very, very expensive. But that is a staple that is normally pretty cheap. Problem is, It's rising to the point of being like water cooler conversation here in Asia. Every country, even in Taiwan, the rice prices are getting to the point people are going, rice is getting really expensive.
How do you feed your families when the shelves are empty, the stores are shut, and there's no food available? What is the fastest, easiest, and most productive foods to grow? What is the quickest way to get somebody who has no skills at all up and running and producing very quickly? If you understand that we're at a point in history where it is no longer optional to be growing your own food. If you're like really freaked out and concerned because you've never grown food before and you don't have any skills, you don't know how to do that, but you know how important it is, then I want to let you know, however you stumbled here, you're in the right place. My name is Marjory Wildcraft. I'm the founder of the Grow Network, and I have been the female leader in the survival and preparedness space for the last 20 years.
How to grow lots of food, even if you have no experience, are older and out of shape. This is for people who want the fastest and easiest ways to produce healthy and delicious meat, eggs, and vegetables. Because you know that growing your own food is like printing your own money. During this webinar, you will get status of global food shortages, how long the crisis will last, how much space you need to grow food, easiest, highest calorie foods you can produce, a complete plan for producing all the food you need, how to get started today, regardless of season. Marjory will show you the fastest, easiest, and simplest ways to produce calories and nutrition, especially in a crisis and/or grid-down situation. The assumption is that you have no experience and you need to start producing food immediately. The most popular part of the webinar is the Q&A session at the end. So please come prepared with your questions.
Civilization Cycle, Ransom Godwin, David Devine bringing you through the show. 2 parts of the planet, 12 hours difference. Oh, it's an amazing world. Is it flat? As I've had many people write me, I just say I'm over in Asia, and they're like, "Did you see the flat? It was flat when you flew over." Oh, okay, not going to go there. Thanks for the comment, though. Jeez, I don't know, man. I don't have a electrogravitics craft to take me up and about and above the atmosphere. Oh wait, if the world was flat, there'd be some firmament dome. My bad. I couldn't probably pass through that either. But Revolution Radio, thank you for letting us talk about these subjects here, whatever they are. And if you consider freedom of speech something, whatever, how wild and how woo-woo it gets, how scientific it gets, the analysis, whatever form it takes, that we go with the show. Thank you for letting us stay on air to bring our thoughts and ideas. That's how our society evolved, was everybody questioning the current thesis of the day. Like, we can't even do that anymore. You can't do that any longer. Like, they're cooling the past from the 1930s. I came up with some great charts from the 1800s. 1880s all the way to like 1940 with temperature charts showing you that massive spike in the 1930s and down again. They cooled the past to make it look as if it was a linear trend. You know, showing that chart, verboten also. It's just crazy how you can't even show previous scientific data because it doesn't jive with today's consensus, and they should be able to disprove it. But why is that such a dangerous chart to show? Those are the things I ask. But Revolution Radio, please consider a donation here as well. Right on the top tab, how to, donate and keep the freedom of information flowing. It's going to be so important from now. And this was a real comment that somebody sent in and said, "Hey, you flew over to Asia. Did you see the flat? Did you see any curvature on the planet?" No, I didn't. I was only up at probably 35,000 feet. So I had a conversation with somebody that was kind of interesting. And they're like, "Hey, would you listen to this guy? Would you watch this guy's video about a flat earth?" And I was like, "All right, man, if you provide the beer, I'll watch it with you." So anyway, I watched this video, and my take on it was, the world's not flat that we live. The only way it could possibly, the whole video, the way it could possibly true that, this and that and the other with the, like looking over the horizons and things. The only possible way I think it could be anywhere remotely close to what they're trying to explain that it's flat is our Earth is some 20 times larger than we've been told, and there's extra continents outside the ice wall of Antarctica. At that point, because you got to think about, if you were trying to get even at 60, 70, 100,000 feet on Jupiter, to look over the curvature of the horizon on Jupiter, that would be impossible. The planet's just so large. It's an unignited brown dwarf star. So if our Earth was, they tell us it's a certain size. If our Earth was 20 times larger and all of these continents outside the ice wall not available to us, the surf class living here, that would make more sense, because the higher you are, if it was such a more large object, it would appear to have no curvature on it. So that was my 2 cents worth, and thank you for the comment. Just trying to do two birds with one stone, rolling into the second hour. And anyway, Ransom, woo-woo time.
Actually, I thought we'd go the other direction from woo-woo. So I might make a little people mad with this. But as far as the flat earth goes, that's like if a bacteria was living on a basketball and tried to look out at the little highest piece of rubber it could grow on. Would it see a round basketball? And the answer is no. You got to remember perspective. We're so small. Even if you got the best camera that you could possibly get and you went up there, it'd look flat. Unless you were out into outer space, like pretty far away from the planet. And, speaking of some other, right after.
Hey, Ransom, would you be outside the Van Allen radiation belt at that point? Again,
no.
How does human go through the Van Allen radiation belt, or would you have to be 250 miles or lower?
That's a good question about no, you wouldn't have to go that far, I don't think.
Okay. Yeah, I see your map. I love it. That blizzard that's coming into the UK there, they're having the best way I can describe it is a description of a side.
What happened? Did you freeze? What'd you say?
Similar to the children's blizzard, where the ice that was blowing sideways in the hurricane force winds turned into needles as it was freezing, and it penetrated skin, and it like ruined a bunch of people's eyes.
Wow.
And that's why so many people got lost trying to get back in the children's blizzard here in the United States in the 1800s. What you're just showing me is some of the similar warnings. The 140 mile an hour winds coming in, when that stuff goes from water down to turn into the ice, it's not even an ice pellet at that point with the wind, it's an ice needle.
Bullet.
So please beware out there. You're coming into an ice needle storm there at 140 miles an hour. So I digress, man. I keep interrupting you. My bad.
No, that's all right.
Go back to the chart.
I was just going to say before we get into the science here in a minute, that Ryan was saying on the chat that people are reporting power outages already in Ireland from the winds, I believe is what he said. But that makes sense because they have this giant thing going on here. Red.
They rely on a lot of renewables too. I've seen some forward charts on when there's grid load that Ireland is near the top even more than Germany and Denmark for offshore wind. They're going to have to shut down all the wind generation during this storm. So you start to look at renewables there. If you look at forward load grid, or forward load is what they call it when they got. So you're going to be, they're going into some serious negatives. They're going to have to black an enormous amount of people out because they just won't have the power. See, this is something we're not allowed to talk about either. We're not allowed to talk about it.
I don't know where it's at, but I had something for that earlier. There was a little green, like a fair or something, and it was debuting how you could do all this stuff with the solar power. Unfortunately, they had to use a diesel generator to run the tents because it was cloudy, and they couldn't produce enough energy at the energy thing, where they were trying to show off. But anyway,
I would have unplugged that thing. Hey, you guys got to demonstrate your tech.
Right. Well, they couldn't because it couldn't produce enough energy to supply everybody. What I wanted to look at is you keep bringing up Ben Davidson and this micronova thing. And so I'm a little confused because I've been reading a lot about micronovas.
I'm not on board with the micronova. I never really said that. I mean,
no, I know.
Magnetic excursions and magnetic field declines, absolutely yes. But a full-blown micronova that rips off our atmosphere and the entire sheath of the sun comes ripping off and like some, multi-quadrillion ton, proton stream and thing. I'm not on board with that. I just don't see it. Perhaps the glass spherules marked something in the past, but I do see our weather twisting has a lot to do with solar activity and magnetic field changes. But in terms of a full-on micronova, I'm not there yet.
Well, this is the problem with calling anything a micronova off of our sun is that they don't come off of yellow stars. They only come off white dwarf stars when they have a companion star sucking off energy, as they show, like kind of in this picture here. So those are both white dwarf stars, despite one looking yellow on here. And the micronova is when a blast of energy comes off the host star to the companion star. Now, there's a problem because we can't have one of those here because we're not a white dwarf, for one, and we don't have a companion star that close to the star. Now, what he might be talking about I don't know why he calls it a micronova. He didn't coin the name. I don't know why he's using it, but it doesn't fit in science. However, something close to what he's talking about is this, I don't know how you pronounce this, Mayak.
Solar proton.
Mayak?
Oh, Miyake.
Yeah, Miyake. All right, there we go. I didn't want to sound, like messed up on my accent there, but this is
with
something.
America and Gulf America, you got the Miyake.
Yeah. Where we're at, we call it America. We're not Americans. Anyway.
Americans.
The timing of the BCE thing, solar proton event, constrained to between 664 and 663 BC. So this is kind of still theoretical. But it explains all of the heavy isotopes and different things that might be on the surface, along with other phenomenon that could deposit it in the same way. Like 12,900 years ago, impacts would create these same isotopes from space. So this is more like what he's talking about. I don't really know. So I'm not worried about a micronova because for A, we're not a white dwarf, and B, you need a companion star to produce that. But our sun does burp pretty large sometimes, right? And that's what they're talking about. The Carrington event was something little, and our infrastructure was basic at that time. Now, anything that's an X45 or above then now gives you the potential for problems as far as electricity. But the magnetic reversal, like we talked on the Tim show, we know that that's already happened. It's happened several times. It's trapped in lava. It's trapped in rock. We know the magnetic field changed. Now, what would that mean on Earth? You know, like what you're looking at, what would you physically see? I have a feeling that it would be all chaos because you would have stuff coming in from the sun that would reach really far into our atmosphere close to the ground. So we're talking speciation, mutation, etc. A lot of probably plasma from the high quartzite mountains, from Mount Everest to probably all these megalithic things that people built trying to reach the sky. So like if you lived in Machu Picchu, you might actually see a lot of lightning bolts coming off that main rock that's at the center of their thing that tells them when to farm on the terraces. So it has like a multi-function, but there's a reason that they thought that was something special there before they moved there. So I imagine it was some kind of event just like that. And you have to remember from the Anwar province in Egypt all the way to like Cusco, you see evidence of vitrification on the stone coming from one direction or another. So whatever it was hot enough to melt the stone. And the only thing that I could possibly think of is one of these Miyake events that actually put solar plasma all the way down into the low Earth atmosphere because there was a magnetic field collapse. And then on top of that, you would have seen bugs, birds, whales, fish, bats, anything with magnetite or magnetic navigational, whatever they have that allows them to do that. A lot of people theorize humans also have something like that. But you would have seen massive chaos with the animals. So if that happened now, there's no telling what that would look like. There would be nomadic people and native people all over the planet in less industrialized areas where their food wasn't where it was supposed to be. And if you really think about that, that might have been the spark that made different kinds of hominids start moving around the planet. And we know there were bottlenecks in these genetics from everything from Neanderthal to probably Denisovan, considering we haven't found much fossil record for them, but they are in our DNA. Which brings me to the DNA and the AI that you asked about earlier. Now, I've taken several of these, and no, they do not tell you the same thing. And the reason for that is because they have different AI programs, and how they judge your ethnicity or genetic background is through prediction and projection. So the AI projects what you are based on the other people that they've genetically tested. So it's not like black and white. So if you were to get an accurate picture of your ancestry, you would have to take probably 3 different tests from 3 different companies. Or you could take one test, download it, and then upload it to the other services where they would give you different results. Like one of mine said that, well, one thing that they do that can tell you a lot of information that's not a speculation is your paternal and maternal haptypes and haplogroups, because that will tell you classically where your ancestors were, because they compare them to bodies of modern humans before history, prehistory. So Cro-Magnon, different things like that. They know what haptypes they were. And some of these, like, which is very interesting because it tells a totally different story than your recent DNA, which only tells you what maybe 8 generations back genetics are like and where they were at. So there's classic DNA, and then there's recent DNA. So Ancestry.com will show you your recent DNA and your classic DNA, but they mix it up in a very convoluted way where it's hard to tell what it really means. So it'll just give you a geographical area. So according to them, I'm 50% Scottish, 10% Irish, like something original Britain, and so on. On the other one, it says different numbers. Like I took a different one. It said I was more Irish than Scottish. However, that one showed me the percentage of archaic DNA that I carry, which is really the whole key to everything. So when these AIs are scanning your genetics, what they're doing is they're looking for markers from different hominids, either Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, Denisovan, or one of the various ghost species around the world that they don't want to teach people about. So there's also a kind of political agenda as well with the historical data. So like one site says classic DNA, I would be considered a third Roman, a third Greek, and a third Egyptian. That's right, from the Nile River. I know that makes some people mad. But when you consider that most of the people in the UK, about 70% of them share genetics with King Tutankhamun, that makes sense. And people forget that people migrate and they move. So 2,000 years ago is not going to be the same group of people as now, because people move around, people get conquered, the maps are redrawn, and people, they migrate all over the place. So you would have to take several DNA tests or share your DNA data upload with several different companies, and then you'll get a general picture of what it is. But if your DNA is more homogeneous, it's a lot easier for them to recognize. So this is weird. So one test says I'm 2% Spanish, and I'm wondering, do they mean Spain, Spanish? No, they mean classical DNA from that area in the Iberian Peninsula, which would be like Roman DNA. So it's really convoluted on what they're telling you. But the key to those things is the sales. So, for example, they might want to sell me a drug that helps me go to sleep because I have a Neanderthal gene that makes me a night owl. Although I'm from an area traditionally kind of, let's say, fair, pasty type people, I have a gene from Neanderthal that gives me dark skin. So I have a gene from a different hominid, and people forget that too, that each of these different hominid groups had an array of shades of skin. They have genes for dark, light. We know that Neanderthal had red hair, but they didn't have freckles. They had blonde, brown, and black hair also. So Cro-Magnon also had a range of those same things, from the skin tones to the hair color. But certain genes are from certain hominids. So like I have the gene for high altitude, and I can use little bits of oxygen because I have a gene from Denisovan that they theorize is why people in Tibet and all those other places can live at high altitudes and have no problem with it. They don't get hypoxia or nothing. But it's really weird because they're still teaching an out-of-date history of man that genetic science is totally disagreeing with now. So there wasn't this one linear branch of human evolution. In fact, there were probably up to 30 different types of humans, and even probably 20 all the way up to the end of the last ice age. They just found a site in China that insinuates that Denisovan may have been around as little as 5,000 years ago. There's people in Indonesia right now hunting down the Hobbit man because the local tribes say they still see them from time to time. And we know that was a real hominid. It's not a fairy tale. There's more proof of that than Bigfoot, right? We have bones, we have DNA from it. So we know it existed, and people are saying we're still seeing it in the jungle. So now there's a whole team of people out there looking around for something that once was a myth. Kind of like the panda bear, right? The panda was a myth, at least to Western people, for a long time. Teddy Roosevelt came in there with the hunting party, couldn't find it. The guy Lloyd Pye mentioned, did the panda do something weird to evade detection? No, it's a dumb creature who's sitting out there eating bamboo, doing its thing, being a panda. Then we found it, and then it wasn't a myth anymore. But yeah, so if you were relying on those DNA sites to tell you, one thing, it's probably going to tell you a lot of stuff, but it all revolves around the new technology that's unfolding to sell you manufactured drugs based on your genetics. So like I was saying, you might have a Cro-Mag gene, which is basically the core species of humans, but you might have a specific gene that was replaced by one of the other hominids a long time ago. And they know, and this gets into some really scary stuff, because you could design drugs for a positive or negative outcome based on your archaic DNA. So like East Asians have up to 5% Neanderthal. Some East Asians have Denisovan, but China almost has none, which is very bizarre because they live right next to Koreans and Japanese. They do have a high content of Denisovan. And people in Australia, they have the highest content of Denisovan DNA. And the I'm going to say political ideologies of the past have lumped them together with other people around the world, even though they're not even related to them. So they don't teach people that there's multiple origins for phenotypes as far as your looks and appearance. So there's more than one origin for the white phenotype. There's more than one origin for the black phenotype. And they've already proven that humans didn't walk out of Africa and then mutate into all these different people, but instead there were people already in the other places, and people moved and then mixed, and here we are, the mutt species in the future. Now the problem is we're at the same point in history as when all the hominids were mixing, but this time it's from a technological elite. So now they're the ones with the keys to the kingdom. And it seems like they're about to exploit what makes us human, literally the human essence. They're trying to package into a algorithm to sell it back to us. And we're going into the era of designer humans. And you can tell that, like when you go to these websites, they're trying to sell you stuff to teach you about your traits, stuff to teach you about what medicines you need, like you said, what diet. And the truth is that that's going to be different for everybody around the world, depending on what their historical context and genetic contributions are. So like somebody in China is not going to be trying to drink a bunch of milk, right? Because there's a lot of lactose intolerant, because they know that came from a specific group of people that started farming and using dairy cattle and started eating milk and cheese. So there's a whole big portion of the world that is going to be tailor sold to her. In other words, the commercials, the advertisements, and you brought this up last time. You sit around and talk in your house, the phone and everything picks it up. Then they try to sell you stuff based on your own conversations. So like the other day, I was looking up the websites that do free DNA testing if you upload the file, and sure as it rains, I got advertisements from every single platform telling me which sites will do exactly that. And I mean, overwhelmingly, it was on my phone, it was on the tablet. I went to YouTube. The commercial on YouTube was that. It's a world that we're involved in that people don't see yet. And there's a new article out that kind of puts it in perspective that phones, tablets, and screens are literally causing hallucinations. Hallucinations and a weird, perverted realization of the reality around them. So it's all perverted into another thing. And it's really affecting children from about 13 years and up. And it's causing things like aggression, antisocial behavior, Now, there's no telling what exactly is causing that. Like, is it the advertisements? Is it the news? Is it being connected to the world? Is it the flicker rate? Is it, there's so many avenues you could go down. But keep in mind, Steve Jobs refused to let his children have tablets and phones. And so do the other tech oligarchs. They're not using their own products.
Well, I was writing some notes. That was a really interesting bit that you threw there. I was writing down some notes. So, the first thing that came to mind is with archaic DNA testing, could they find a less compliant part of civilization that would be tied to that same marker? Because if you're looking for a total compliance serf type civilization, you would want to remove those people out that had that specific marker. Maybe the less compliant who are more individualistic thinking, that do their own research, they try to dive into, other theories versus just listening to news and believing it. Perhaps they're part of Denisovan or part of Neanderthal. That's not given to us, that information. I'm absolutely sure that'd be the best thing if we take an archaic DNA test versus.
We froze. Hello? We'll be back after this short technical difficulty. I was going to look for that article until we do buying back. He froze. I don't know. Maybe I got kicked off the call. Let me see. No, I'm still on the call. So I think we're still broadcasting, at least on this end. And I will find that article that I was talking about. So people are, kids, I guess. If I could hit the right buttons here. Smartphone use leads to hallucinations, detachment from reality, and aggressions in teens as young as 13 study. And it gets all into, the amount of time, but they never really come to a conclusion of the cause. So I don't know. I think that would be totally possible for you to find a certain gene in any number of the populations, or a gene that's the same gene but for the other group that's dominant in that person, and exploit it. And they may have already done that. See, the archaic DNA test that I took said I was about 0.29% Denisovan, which is really rare for Europeans. But considering my maternal haptype is a U2E, and one of the oldest haptypes found in Cro-Magnon, and that spread around. There we are. He's back.
Internet just suddenly turned off. I was trying to, follow and dovetail you right on there. Can I start again with my thoughts? I didn't realize until I saw the squiggly line that said, no connectivity. So when you were talking about that, I myself am more interested in the archaic DNA test. So imagine if we don't have to think about if we were English or Egyptian or whatnot, Persian, don't care. I want to go 30,000 years into the past, because I think, just in my own analysis of, we both kind of dovetail in a lot of research. If you could know what the compliant or the non-compliant part of population is based on that archaic DNA. I mean, maybe there's a marker in there for Denisovan or Neanderthal, or people like me. I just want to do my own research. I don't care what narratives I hear in the media. I like to, double it down and take a look at my own research and see truly, is it true, is it not? Like, maybe that's part of 5% of the population. If they can mark that, that's the 5% of the population they would definitely want to remove. They wouldn't want you having offspring. They wouldn't want that offspring, continuing down, because then if it's diluted, even if it's 1%, 2% of noncompliance, the brains are working differently in the way that we perceive information. And this has always been the goal for kings, queens, oligarchs, and, further back in the past. Total compliance. If you think the Anunnaki were here, do you think they not wanted 1,000% total compliance? Like the barbarian and brutality of the stories of them, even if you looked at them, they would kill you instantly. Right. So coming back with the archaic DNA to have this mind that works differently than the compliant serf and slave population. That would be a marker for removal. Absolutely. And if the AI could figure out where everybody is and which, they could remove probably 99% of us right now based on this. And when you talk about the AI giving you specific plugged in media, on demand social posts for you specifically that nobody else will see. They're just created just for you to move your mind. Like, you have to realize what we look at around in social media, a lot of what that comes into your feed, like Ransom's feed and my feed are going to be very different. I would love to sit with him next and we'd both look at, X and see exactly what pulls through.
Right.
And me with Ryan helping us too. And like me, you and Ryan sitting down together with all three of us pulling through our social feeds. Even if we put the same keyword search in for like Blizzard, for example, we would all get different social media posts coming down through. And the whole movement forward with AI is on demand social media posts for you, specifically for you, created for you in real time. Now, if they understood that you had a DNA marker that was into this more, I don't believe everything I hear, I don't believe everything I read, I need to do more of my research, could that spin you down 1,000 rabbit holes? And then eventually when they have their AI robot army, would it say David lives at apartment this or address this, go there first? Because I do believe part of the reason they want, the track and trace is one thing, but to identify everybody's DNA is to, and the ultimate goal, if you were going to recreate a slave race on the planet very much after the creation of us, the Homo sapiens sapien, they had to use native species to at least start this. That native species DNA characteristic still remains with us. They've been trying to stomp it out for 300,000 years plus. They've been trying to remove that. But is this the time now where AI combines with that to remove that segment of population to finally, you're talking about a golden age, that would be something where that trait might not bring itself back up again for thousands of years, where there'd be a totally compliant slave race on this planet for 2,000 years of bidding and usage by the elite. Because at some point, I don't know when it is, but it always breaks back through. So maybe in 2,000 years, Ransom's lineage will come down and there's some spark in there that always held on even at 1/10 of 1% of something in the brain that functions differently, that always questions information. And then, somebody else has a daughter that's out there, and then 2,000 years later, their offspring meet and they suddenly have children, and it goes from 1% and 1%, whoosh, right up to 5%. And suddenly that person, that individual is the one that restarts all of what we see through history of questioning of this, asking why we can't do this. Why do kings have this much power? Why do oligarchs have this much? Why do central banks have this much power? And I think it's non-suppressible to a 0%. I just don't believe.
Oh, I lost you. Oh, there you go.
Can AI use the understanding of all of us humans together with, like you say, archaic traits to remove the ones that have the highest percentage of that marker that's in a non-compliance marker? You're talking about, on-demand medicine or specific, personalized medicine, but in that nefarious sweep of everything too, archaic DNA would determine who is going to follow completely and who is not. Because I am going to say something that might anger a few people, but that leftist blue-haired cadre that sits over there, if you were going to do DNA markers on them, I guarantee they would all be very similar. Compared to Ransom and I and a few others I know sitting in the same room, our markers would be very different than the blue-haired Karens sitting over there. Guaranteed it would be. Well, what is that marker that they can identify between the difference of that? I know, I'll leave it there.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And actually, you're not even getting too deep with how nefarious that can be. So here's an article talking about adults with ADHD found to have reduced life expectancy. So there would be a gene associated with, whether or not you're distracted or whatever. So, that's kind of anecdotal stuff. Where was this other one that I had? People in the morning. People who only sleep for 5 hours.
People who only sleep for 5 hours.
Right? This is supposed to be a gene, and it goes on and on. Actually, I got a little echo.
Hey, Trump only sleeps for like what, 3 hours or 4 hours a night?
Right.
Maximum?
Well, that's about what I sleep. And what's funny is you said you were over there on the other side of the world, so now you're on my cycle because I'm up at night all the time. I always see the moon come up, I see it go down, I see the sun come up before I get tired. And literally, when I check my DNA, I have the night owl gene from Neanderthal, but I test positive for that marker, but I also test negative for the gene that causes narcolepsy, which also comes from Neanderthal. So I think I can tell you how nefarious this could be with my next statement. There's also a gene for virus recognition, which Neanderthals, they have a gene, but it doesn't recognize certain kinds of diseases. So in other words, their body won't have a reaction to it whenever they catch it. So they'll just start to get sick. The normal things that start in most people to start, fighting off the virus won't happen. So they're not going to get a fever right away. They're not going to get, stuffy nose and boogers or whatever. And then there's another gene for inflammatory response, which causes a lot of people harm, actually, when something happens to them and then they have an inflammatory response to it. I test negative for the gene that causes that. But I also test positive for an anti-inflammatory gene. So what I'm saying is that if you were in control of the keys to the kingdom,
itself out with the histamine response in the body.
Well, actually, it could be
so you
bad.
can eat almost everything without having any response. So imagine wild foraging. Like me, I might have some sort of histamine response to the same food that you ate, but those two offsetting genes mean you can literally eat anything without a response to it.
Right. But also remember that each hominid had a corresponding gene that worked for them. That's almost the same gene, but it was in a different group. So like I was saying about the hair or skin, there's a certain gene that both of them have that are different, but you might have one or the other or both, right? So that's kind of a bizarre thing. But my point is so me personally, I have a gene that prevents me from having an inflammatory response, but combined with the gene that doesn't recognize viruses right away could kill me because my body didn't cause any kind of response to what I got. So what I'm saying is, if you knew which genes people had, you could cause them to be healthy or the opposite of that, from anything from food to viruses. So you could get really nefarious.
Well, wait, which ones would you want to keep alive, though? Because those same markers can determine compliance or non-compliance. So now we're doing like a Rubik's Cube of compliance, non-compliance, these different gene markers that could set on something to respond in the body or not. So now you're starting to, you would really need AI to try to delve into it to do, when I say personalized medicine, a specific thing created for each individual. If they can do it with social media posts, they could sure do it with medicine.
Right. So I read that article about ADHD, right? So there's probably something to that. I don't know what it is, but a corresponding gene that might make people more alert or more sleepy or whatever it is in a certain circumstance. But if you have the knowledge of that, keep in mind that we're also in the era of manipulating genes and, epigenetics. So in other words, you could make things that turn on or off a certain gene you have. So you might have a gene that prevents you from getting a certain disease, but now it's turned off. So
could you use Chinese medicine and go over to Asia or to go over to India and Ayurvedic medicine and find that same plant cure and turn it back on again?
It's very possible. Actually, there's a guy, I'm sure you know, Shiva Ayyadurai, and he has a whole company that is studying epigenetics and the molecules that turn those on and off. It's so weird to have to talk in word salad to not say certain stuff. But there's
I
a
know
lot
I
of
wanted to talk about a few things too, but I just, you know how it is.
there's a lot of companies that specialize in these things. So I guess one we won't get in trouble for is cannabinoids, right? So there's like thousands of different cannabinoids, and there's companies that are figuring out what exactly that does to a person. Now, when you combine this with other sciences like studying what genes do what in reaction to what, you could, I guess, personalize drugs for people, but you could also personalize attacks on people. I think people get what I'm saying. In other words, it's not hard to design something that can be nefarious or malevolent, just simply by knowing who people are and what their ancestry is. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, it does. And shout out to Chase Hudson and the crew at Hemp Lucid also, because they're experimenting with a lot of these cannabinoids to try to bring healing properties into the body. So give them a look. I mean, it's not even one of our sponsors. It's just I know Chase, and I know they go out of their way to use non-chemical and get some of the purest grown plants out there first to start that process. So there are others out there on our side looking for this same turn the key back. And that's one of those companies that does that.
Yeah, I have a little story. It's irrelevant, but my mother-in-law twisted her ankle at the airport coming in, and it was all bruised up. We actually used one of those Hemp Lucid pain creams for her, and within the night, the bruise went away, and she said she was feeling nice. Her ankle felt great. And yeah, they're not even a sponsor. We just happened to use one of their products, and gave it to her, and she was like, "Wow, this is a miracle. Where do we get more?" And I was like, "Well, you gotta get it from those people." There's a free commercial.
Yeah, reach out, just say, "Jay, hey, give a shout out." Say, "Hey, Chase, I heard about you on the show there." But
Right.
yeah, we should reach out to Chase. He had a few changes in life too. Happy, good changes. So just a little busier these days. But we should definitely reach out to him and say, "Hey, see what's going on." And let me throw on something. I want to swing back again, because this is very much into our archaic survival. Because you were talking about, lightning or plasma discharges onto the planet here. Like that would be the ultimate electroculture. Because if you kept seeing lightning strike in a certain area on a certain mountain range, and then that phenomenon stopped either half a generation or 5-10 years later, that you wouldn't get those same strikes again, would you not go there to try to see what changed? I mean, imagine the bounty of growing plants in that area that had been so highly electrified in the soils, and the magnetism would be so different on that mountain for such a long time. I mean, that would be a natural healing area to go to. And when we talk about dolmens, people would always like, okay, excuse me, the traditional sense of it is, okay, we got plasma discharges raining down on the planet. People running to these dolmens. If you know what a dolmen is, it's super giant boulders that are stacked on top of each other. And when I say boulders, I'm talking the 3-4 foot thick, building blocks that the ancients had put together. So for me, it wasn't a single event where they're like, okay, there's more plasma from my micronova one-time event. This was the same that you were describing of magnetic field declines over 30, 40 years. It comes to some bottom point, then it comes out. We're talking about 2 generations plus. So think about if, like you say, that radiation or the actual particles coming in, hitting parts of the planet, or, radiation would also be dissipated by running into these dolmens as well. So it doesn't have to be just plasma, but radiation saturation too could be mitigated or lessened by coming into these dolmens. Like the amount of dolmens before, if you look at now, there's hardly any around the planet. There's probably 50,000 or 100,000 or under on the entire planet. But before, as far as the research I'd seen, a lot of different research bases, 4 million plus dolmens are on the planet. Now, over the last couple hundred years, specifically the last couple hundred years, they've been using these for road building projects. They'll rip them apart if they're in the way. They were constructing roads or cities or whatever. You got all these giant building blocks together of stones. They would just tear them down with the modern equipment and then move them out of the way, use them in other construction projects. There were at least 3 or 3.5 million cataloged that were 200 years ago prior. But as we come in today, there's less than 100,000, which meant that if there were that many millions, then it was a prolonged building project. So the Earth had encountered something that was in a multi-generation event of magnetic shifting. It wasn't like a one-off event. So a lot of people think, micronova, you're going to get splashed with a bunch of particles, and it's going to be a one-time event. Like these people quickly built this to like hide out from the plasma discharge. I don't think so. Like if I had the Earth building equipment, I myself would be building a dolmen on my own property right now, knowing these changes are coming. So if you had a dolmen in advance on your own property already built that could house 20, 30, 50, 100 people, that would be some sort of refuge spot. Or those who have caves on their property, why don't you get them ready? Go in and install some electric in there, put some giant chandeliers, make it look cool, run some like mood lights and make that stuff bounce off the rock and come down. Make it cool to be in there, not just like a dark cave where you're hiding out from the plasma, but build your own magnetic motor and run it inside there, and then you can have everything as an offset. But think about the residual charge on that too. Like if you have this much electricity coming into the crust, and Ransom, you'd mentioned hitting on specific points with crystalline structures, melted rock. If there was that much additional charge in the crust, perhaps this is where ley lines and these stories of ley line intersections come from. There would be some residual glow, because please remember that if you go down to the molecular level in different types of microscopes, you can actually see the coloration of the atoms glowing. And specifically when they do, like this is a super basic experiment, running electricity into a certain substrate of 100% of that atom, whether it be a gold plate, an aluminum plate, a magnesium plate, or just copper, or whatever it is, just run some electricity through it, and eventually there will be an ethereal glow around the plate, and they all take on different shades and depths and hues of color. So would it not be the same if we had a very amplified, incredibly electrified crust, that we would not see the mineral veins? Would it not be waist high? Would it be a mile high? We just don't know. Would it be 100-foot high? But you would see these colors emanating out of the planet after the discharges were at their greatest. And if it was a multi-generational event, then the planet would have been just supercharged the whole time. Where if I was a child, and I am now, and I had children and my grandchildren would have seen it, we would already know this area was always blue over here. So after this, whatever excited state of magnetism would have dissipated from the sun and the earth, those color charges would have decreased until today, when we don't see it any longer. So you wonder, why do they always build these temples in certain spots? Why do they build cathedrals in certain spots? If we electrify the crust, I'm sure there'd be a blue hue coming out of the earth, and that's where they put these temples and sacred spots, because they understood where that would go to. I don't know if that was I was trying to dovetail in there on you, because, the innate ability, and how many times have these geomagnetic excursions would we have seen this? Because 12,000 years between those, how long is the electrified state afterward that people would remember that was a certain emanation of, looking at auras? And I'm wondering if human auras glow brighter during this time too, where you can actually see somebody walking around with the real colors around them, and there's no way to hide. So the dark auras would be, okay, those are the demons, those are the vampires, those are the witches, whatever you want to call them, that they kicked them out of the village because they actually had that color that couldn't be disguised. Like today, we call them politicians. They can disguise a lot of that coloration through video screens and whatnot. But I was going somewhere with it. Take it away, man. You can follow
reptilian shapeshifters. No, I wanted to say, think about this idea.
Aura color shifters or something like this.
Right. Well, think about this idea. If you had lightning, plasma, striking down more often on rock outcroppings of rock that has a highly quartzite concentration, or a lot of quartz in it, so it conducts the electricity. But we know now that photons slow down literally when they go through quartz crystal and other crystals. So it's like if you were swimming through water, you're not moving as fast as you are on land. The photons do that same thing. So they would have had more than just a piezoelectric reaction. You might get light emanating after it, even after the electricity has run through it in the form of
you'd be capturing
protons.
light itself, would you not?
Right. But think about this. If you were just barely intellectually technological or understood certain ideas, if you saw an outcropping repeatedly being struck by lightning, I don't know, would you build a worldwide grid of obelisks made out of quartzite materials or hard andesite or diorite or whatever it is, all of these different rocks with large amounts of crystal that will have a piezoelectric power generation, and I don't know, make a power plant out of a pyramid out of those same rock stuff, and connect a worldwide grid mathematically, and then not only that, but leave the mathematical information built into the sacred sites that I'm talking about, because it seems like that's exactly what happened, but they don't want to tell you that.
Yeah, it does. And then if you could figure out the transmission system between those two, or how to harness that charge in between, then we come back into, I wouldn't even say folklore anymore. We're right back into the 1880s with the inventions from Nikola Tesla.
Right.
And then Marconi, was such a, well, like Marconi disappeared from history as well. We give him credit with, inventing offshore radio, but he and Tesla were like best buddies, inventing incredible amounts of wireless technologies. And all we know from Tesla is he tried to compete with Edison on the bulb. He got beaten up. It didn't work. And he died broke in a New York hotel room. That's kind of all we really give him credit for. Yeah, he knew some stuff about electricity, but that's it.
Right.
He really was the master. And, beyond the Einstein, like 20 Einsteins of understanding electrical workings of our universe, and gave us free power using magnets on plates that spun against each other to create the charge. Like we never would have had to burn a single pound of coal on the planet ever since the 1880s had we utilized his inventions.
Right.
But somehow we got taken down this really dark path of, and here's where I wanted to try to go with that, stripping the minerals out of our earth in a certain place and consolidating them into a more diffused pattern across the entire planet. Because you got to think about the mining that was required for all of the copper that has now been above our heads. Like we never needed a single copper wire above our heads ever. So why was that done? And why do we have to remove and balance the minerals around our world? And it comes back into the same conversation here. If we're going to get electrical discharges on the planet, then what is it going to do this time differently than where the minerals were by the billions of tons in our crust versus the last 100 years where we moved all that around and put it in sort of a spiderweb fashion around the planet?
Right. Well, and think about this. If you were standing by a rock outcropping and there's a gold vein in it and it gets struck by lightning, that's going to roll right down the gold vein, and it might bust the rocks out, where people discovered not only that electricity goes through gold, but that gold is somehow important by itself. And think about these ancient people: gold, mercury, quartzite. What's that? Chicken?
Well, there's always quartz where there's gold. Look for them both in the veins.
And how many
exploring out in the west? Hey, I want to come out and I'm going to gold pan with you up there.
How many Teslas were born in the age of Cro-Magnon, Denisovan, and Neanderthal, and all these other guys? We only know of one guy born in our era, but think about all the geniuses born throughout time back 100,000 years. What would that look like? What would he make in his era of a Neolithic time period? Maybe, I don't know, stone technology?
Yeah,
literally.
Compressed water technologies and compressed air technologies were around in the Roman era. Like we lost 1,500 years of technology somehow from then, and then it restarted in the 1750s. Like, where did that 1,500 years of technology disappear to? I don't know. Those are the questions we like to ask and continue to ask. So thank you so much for supporting us. buymeacoffee.com/civilization cycle. Also the sponsor for tonight's videos. Rolling through with My Patriot Supply and our best water filters. We left everything, the links below, so you can boil water in a flash Kelly kettle. If you're out in an emergency situation, you can do some boiled water using almost no fuels. So if you like this kind of content, please continue to support us. We try to bring you some of the best ideas, products, and solutions that we can find, because we're not going to waste your time or your money. We really try to be the cleanest we can to bring you the best information and the best products. And thank you so much for your support. We want to bring it to you next week and the week after and the week after. But we do have costs. You know, we got running costs here. We got production costs. We got software costs. We have all these other things that we need to pay for on a weekly and monthly as well. So continue to support us, and we'll see you next week. Ransom, throw us out on the last thought.
What if they were just rolling big rocks on electrified mercury rivers?
Talking about mercury is verboten.